Hi, I'm Lisa, and I'm here with Katrina Boldry of Boldly Designs and founder of Mobility Dog Resource Group. And we're here to talk about mobility dog harnesses. And so, do you want to just give an overview of what people should look for when it comes to mobility dog harnesses?
Sure. First, what I want to clarify is the way we're using mobility for the most part in this chat is going to be a dog that's helping with balance assistance, okay, with helping someone be able to walk better with a dog. Because mobility can also apply to guide dogs and dogs that open doors for people in wheelchairs. That's also mobility. But the way we're going to use that word today is going to be the physical assistance for stability.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, that one gets tricky.
When people are shopping around for a mobility harness, what should they look for as far as like green flags and what are some red flags?
Okay.
Like, I already know Amazon's kind of a red
So
flag,
I would
but-
say nothing on Amazon is going to
Yeah.
provide mobility assistance. And then the next component is how's the dog going to be helping you? What
Yeah.
are you expecting your dog to do? Because now it's going to matter if you're looking for leading or pulling. It's going to be sometimes a little different than if you just need counterbalance. And there are some that do both well, and there are some that just do one and not the other very well.
Okay.
So you want to look for something that is also really well fit to your dog. Okay. It needs to be the right size. The straps need to adjust in all the right places. And there are some pretty specific areas that we want to avoid putting pressure on a dog and areas where we want to be distributing pressure over. Okay. What we're looking for is something that has broad pressure distribution because the wider something is, the less pressure per square inch there is. But also if it's too wide, it might cross over a joint that is then causing interference. So there's kind of it's very individual. So it's going to depend, bottom line, on the dog's conformation, and how the dog is going to be assisting the person and what the person needs from the dog. All these things have to fit together.
Other than like ethical reasons, why should someone care? Because I know obviously there's ethical reasons that we want to keep the dog safe and healthy, but just from like the perspective of longevity as an example.
That is a great question.
I was going to say, a lot of people will say like, oh, this one's way cheaper. Like, why wouldn't I just buy it on Amazon? Why should I care? Which I know from like a training standpoint, you should care because that's going to help your bond. But maybe talk a little bit more anatomically what's happening.
Sure.
And also, if your dog is injured, they're not going to be able to work long term.
A harness that's properly designed and fitted to do what you're asking the dog to do is going to lower the chance of high strain, high pressure, and repetitive motion. Okay, that's what we're looking for when we're talking about choosing the right. Quick. I sometimes think of dog gear like shoes. You wouldn't go climbing a mountain in high heels, right?
No.
And just putting tread on the bottom of that shoe is not going to make it a hiking shoe. Okay. I feel like that's how some are. You just slap a handle on it and there's no real purpose to the handle. It's just there because somebody decided to put it there. So we want to avoid things like that. We want to look for intention and preferably a maker that has really done that research. That understands where the right places and the incorrect places are to put pressure on the dog. Okay. One of the most important things we're going to do is we're going to talk about, so here's my little skeleton dog. So right behind the shoulders, right here, which would be the girth line, and right across the front of the breastbone as it comes across the dog, that's the center of their gravity. Okay. So if we put things way back here, then it's putting pressure up into their belly. We don't, or maybe even into their neck. We don't want to do that. And if it's too far forward, it can pinch the shoulder blades or even restrict the front of that shoulder joint. The scapula is quite long, so it goes from the top of the dog's shoulders, that's the withers, and then down to that front point of the shoulder. Those are the areas that we want to keep free from direct pressure, at least.
Yeah.
We want to put it around the solid parts of their body where there's good, strong bones that don't move. And there's a few different ways to do that. And it's going to come back to the individual dog and what you're asking the dog to do.
Do you find that the dog also, when they're in a better fitted harness, perform better in terms of tasks and stuff?
I do.
Okay.
I do, especially dogs that are a little bit more sensitive. Some dogs just aren't super body sensitive. You know, they'll tolerate anything, right?
Yeah.
They don't mind. It doesn't mean it's okay.
It's like more resilient.
Yes.
Versus...
So sometimes these dogs are so stoic, they're not going to tell us it hurt. They're going to work because you asked them to. So that's up to us. That's our responsibility to make sure that we are outfitting the dog to prevent any kind of soreness or injury or anything like that. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's going to go along with that is making sure the dog is properly fit and conditioned because, the more fit and strong you are, you're going to be able to perform better. Same thing with dogs.
The other thing I wanted to ask was, I know you make various types of handles.
Mm-hmm.
What are the reasons for the different types of handles? Because I know you have ones that are more sturdy and then more flexible. Why would someone use one over the other?
That's a really good question. Would you like to see some examples?
Sure.
Can you put that guy up here, please? They barely fit on here together, but I think you can see them both.
You can.
So these are the harnesses I designed. I'm not the only one. There's other options out there, but I can speak to how I designed this and why. Okay. So this is a mobility support harness, and this has a rigid metal bar. The rigid vertical handle is for balance assistance, and it can do light bracing when the dog is standing still. We want to specify that if you're putting pressure into the dog, right, pushing into the dog needs to be prepared and standing ready for that pressure. Otherwise, we're kind of just yanking them around. That's not cool.
It's like engaging your core before doing something like picking up a heavy box.
You don't lift with twisty motions.
Okay.
Right? You want the same thing with the dog. So this handle, a lot of people will just rest their hand on it, right? And that just gives them a sense of proprioception. And that just means where you are in space, your ability to orient and know where your body is. For some people, just touching this handle while they're walking is more than enough. And then they might need a little bit of help getting up out of a chair. Okay. So that's when this will be used for bracing. So it's momentary, so short periods of time, and really no more than a few pounds of pressure.
Okay.
I think why these handles become so controversial is because a lot of people have unreasonable expectations. They're asking their dog to do too much, and they're not thoughtful enough about how they are handling. When we go to something that could potentially be used incorrectly, and it's somebody who may not be able to do it that way, I'm going to say stay away from this.
Okay.
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 All right. And surprisingly, I have found most people think they need a rigid handle. Most people don't in reality.
Okay.
This particular harness, for example, also has an option to add a leather handle. So it can be flexible or semi-rigid in any length. These can be any length. But what this one can do is, so now, because right here, what happens if the dog were to pull?
Yeah.
Pull back on that. What's happening here?
It's moving.
Well, right.
Okay.
And it's digging.
Oh, gotcha.
It's
Yeah.
digging into the dog's spine right here. Okay. And then if we start to fall sideways, it can get ugly really fast. We want to be very conscious about how we use this. Double, for example, you can learn to pull up, right? Pull up to stabilize yourself. It's going to be a lot less
pressure.
That's basically then going to be the dog's mass. Rather than their muscles. There are harnesses. I'm going to step over to this one now. So this is my light assistance harness. So this handle is currently set vertical. So this one can do nice balance assistance while you're right next to the dog. It's flexible enough so the dog can actually pull here. This does a very similar thing for pulling. It's just that this is vertical. So it is possible to combine handles depending on what you need, because different circumstances might require a different leverage point. So if I'm walking up a hill, it's different than walking downstairs. So when the handles are more vertical like this, that's really nice for counterbalance. And if they're slightly stiff, we can do the same thing we did with this. Just touching it as we're walking provides a lot of feedback. Okay. What we like about the semi-rigid handles is it flexes with you and the dog without applying all that extra movement. Okay. So if we were to let this move in our hand while we're walking, you can see the effect here.
Yeah.
Whereas this one,
the harness stays more in place.
Right. So a lot of that is being absorbed, but you can still feel where the dog is, and the dog can still feel if your gait changes.
Yeah.
Okay. Or can be trained. I really don't like seeing handles attached in front of the shoulders. There have been a couple of research studies that have looked at the impact of guide harnesses on working dogs. They sometimes have mixed results because I don't think that some of those studies have looked at they can't look at all the factors at one time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if that harness didn't fit that dog, the results were not awesome. But what did seem consistent to me is the handles that sat in front of the shoulder tended to put a lot of asymmetrical load on the front of the dog's chest. I choose to lower pressure points when I make harnesses, because anytime we can lower pressure, that just lowers the possibility, just too much force. And what I just said about rigid handles going vertical does not apply to guide dog handles. So rigid handles that are pulling and guiding function very differently. You can't apply the same thing with a rigid handle to a different type of harness. Okay?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of different factors. For example, people who think they're going to want a more sturdy, really securely fit harness where the dog is going to be doing a little bit more heavy mobility, this might be the best option for them. If you're looking to just reduce the load on your dog in general, then something more like this that has less surface area, less coverage, less straps can be lighter weight and lower impact. But not necessarily. Again,
there's a lot of factors.
How it's a fit and if it, in the dog's conformation.
So what is the benefit of even having a service dog over a cane, for example?
That's a really good question. So dogs can be responsive, and a lot of dogs will pick up various cues,
behavioral,
either behavioral or physiological changes. The dog can respond to those, and if they're walking along and they feel their person start to tip backwards, and the dog can say, "Oh, I should probably stop here."
Yeah,
I should probably stop and let her regain her balance. So really you want to coordinate the person and the dog so everybody's moving in sync together.
So you can't just slap a harness on a dog and expect them to know what to do.
Correct. Now, some dogs that have a lot of just really good foundation training are naturally leaning into pressure. For example, and I can show you on Dalton if you'd like.
Okay.
But yeah, if I place my hand on him and push, he's going to counter it. So he's going to push back into it. So those kind of skills can be trained long before you put a harness on a dog. So the harness is almost the last thing you do when you're training a mobility dog. First of all, you need the dog to be mature, but most of the training is done before the harness is ever.
So a lot of people are looking to train an already existing pet dog for mobility dog work. What are some health tests they can do? What are the minimum weight requirements, height requirements? I know it can vary, but I guess if you could just touch on generally.
What's going to matter is we want to make sure that the dogs are fully vetted, make sure they're very, very healthy, especially orthopedically. So we're going to be recommending have those hips, have the pelvis examined. Even spine, shoulders, elbows. Some breeds are more prone to having orthopedic issues, maybe dysplasia or other neurological things, right? So we want to screen those out. If we have a dog that has hip dysplasia, we do not want to put them in work. That's even an ethical question if you work them as a service dog at all. Right? Yeah. But especially if they're going to be doing physical work. So the way to look for that is either pen hip. Or OFA, thank you. And those are two very different tests. They look at very different things. And so, that's going to be something you'll want to go over with your veterinary team, right? None of us are veterinarians. So go to the people that are trained in the specific type of knowledge that you're looking for.
I would even say a step further and go to a veterinary physical therapist.
Yes.
Versus just a general vet.
That's a really good idea. Your regular veterinarian, and I don't mean to throw shade on general practice vets at all, okay? But they're not necessarily specially trained in very nuanced biomechanics, okay? They're going to have a lot more insight into your individual dog's ability than just a general practice vet. Your general practice vet's going to be looking for really obvious things, okay? And that's great. We want to catch really obvious things.
Yeah.
But if it's more nuanced, they may just not catch it because they don't know, simply because they don't have that specialized training.
And my other question too is in terms of the human anatomy too, thinking about the human limb length to dog limb length and keeping the human safe so you're not crouching over. Just an extreme situation would be a 20-pound dog.
Sure.
Obviously that's not good for the dog either, but I just mean what are some things to look for in terms of making sure your dog has the right limb length for your limb length?
That's a good question. We really have no data on what makes that work. What we recommend is let's be reasonable, right? So a taller, larger dog is going to be able to do more work than a short, small dog, okay?
Yeah.
So think of, and actually if we're just going to look at height, let's look at a 50-pound bulldog versus a 50-pound poodle. We're looking at a massive height difference, and that is going to matter because the closer we can keep the person's hand to the dog's shoulders, that just means the shorter the handle is, that means the less energy is needed to pass between the dog and the person. So again, it's just going to be about reducing pressure.
Okay.
Now, if we're talking about soft leather handles, those are really quite squishy. There's a lot of flexibility there. But still, if the dog isn't big enough, they don't have the mass to help you with counterbalance.
Do you think it would be a good exercise to pretend you were fitting this for me? Okay.
This is really cool. I'm going to have you stand sideways. Stand next to her.
Okay.
All right. So if you were heeling your dog, where would you be?
I would be more up here.
Okay. Where's the dog?
Behind me.
Yeah. Right? Okay. So this is not a heel.
Okay.
We want to treat this differently because the dog can't do any work if they're behind you, right? So take a step back. Maybe not that far.
Okay.
Right there. Okay. There we go. Because now if you were to pretend she's heavier, pull up, right?
Yeah.
So do that from a different position, and it's quite different.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So training the dog,
Body position.
the position is going to be a little bit different.
Okay.
I always recommend staying away from an automatic sit, like a formal, like competition heel. An automatic sit is very difficult for dogs to unlearn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's so ingrained.
Yeah.
It becomes such a habit. So it's easier
if
your dog already stands when they stop. But yeah, the position is quite different. And if you were blind, right, we're going to put this dog out further, and you're going to have a longer handle. When your dog turns, you need reaction time to move with them and not trip on them.
Got it. Okay. And then what is more than a few pounds of pressure? Like, is that?
See, you can feel how sturdy that is, right?
Yeah.
So that actually has a lot of sturdiness to it, but because it flexes some, if you push too hard, what's going to happen?
Like that, yeah.
It's going to save the dog. It's just going to prevent that from all going directly into the dog. But so if you can learn to pull instead of push, right, then there'll be less pressure directly into the dog. And then, so when you are counterbalancing, that handle's a little long because your elbow's locked.
Yeah.
Okay. So loosen your hand a little bit. So I hold my hand like this, my handle with just my fingers.
Oh, like this.
Yeah. Almost like reins if I was riding a horse.
Okay.
That's just my personal preference. So you want to have the handle fit your hand while you're standing and straight and comfortable. Our measuring instructions help you figure out that. But are you jealous? Do you want to be doing part of this, Dalton? Yeah. Are you helping? Helping. So this handle's too short for you.
Yeah.
But but that's easy. We just exchanged the handle for a different size.
Got it.
That's easy to fix. But that's where getting the right fit for both the person and the dog is important, because if she has to keep leaning over all the time, that is going to cause some secondary issues from compensation. Yeah. Right. We want to, so we don't want to make people worse.
Yeah.
We want to help them be better.
Yeah.
So here, like you were just demonstrating, is more counterbalance when we're standing like this. But if we were walking and kind of had a little bit of constant tension, we call that a momentum pull. It's usually light. It's not heavy pulling. That's going to put us back closer to the dog's flank. Okay. But the dog and you can balance this way now. So now we have a forward backward. Got it. And then the dog can pull to get you into a safe place. And like I said, some dogs will pick up on the physiological changes and cue you. Okay, wait, you need to go sit down.
Yeah.
All right.
Very cool.
And this handle can actually be softer. I've got it through the upper rings now. But for example, if you primarily want your dog to do momentum pulling, I'm going to take it out of the vertical position, and I'll just show you what that feels like. It feels a little different, which kind of lets you tailor it to what you're doing, what kind of task you want at the time. There we go. Now try that for pulling. Just imagine it's 1.5 inches longer for you.
Yeah.
So now,
more this
it angles back a little bit more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then they guide me to where I need to go. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Cool.
Again, that's why different handles. Some people have multiple handles on their harnesses, right? So I might use a shorter one, I don't know, going upstairs because the dog is up a step. And I might use a longer one if the dog is leading. And if the brace handle, if you're not using it while you're standing, it doesn't even have to be tall. It can be the shorter this can be, the better. It just depends on what you need. For example, maybe you only need a little bit of brace support while you're standing up from a chair. You don't need it to fit you while you're standing necessarily. Anyway, there's a lot of ways to put them together depending on those tasks that your dog.
Will you show us on a real dog, Dalton, how his mobility harness is fitted so that it's the best anatomically for him?
Yeah. I'm just going to point out where the bones are. So right here is the top of the shoulders. Those are called the withers. Behind the withers is where we find that nice line that goes all the way around the dog. Okay. I call that the girth. So we don't want to put pressure directly here or downward pressure. Yeah. Okay. Because there's a lot, these move. Yeah. There's a lot moving around here, and there's nerves and all that good stuff. So we don't want to put, does that feel good? Is that the good spot? And then the next part is, so the bottom of this bone comes to the shoulder joint, right here. It's hard to see with a dog with a lot of fur, but this is the bone, okay, between the front of this shoulder and the top. And this pivot's about right here. the front point of the shoulder, is a really important landmark. We don't want a strap to sit below that. That's going to stop this shoulder from rotating, okay? And it's really uncomfortable. And then the front point of his breastbone is right here. This is the front of the sternum bone, which goes all the way under his body to about here. So this is a really good place to put load-bearing straps because this is a rib cage. So this is the center of his gravity. Dolphin dress. Good, stand. Okay. With this harness on, I just want to point out that this is where that bone is. So the rotation of that bone is right about here, right? So we're staying clear. And in the front of his breastbone is in contact with the breastplate so that any pressure against the chest is into bone, not into flesh. So this does sit over his shoulders, right? But remember that we're not bracing on this. We're not pushing down. In fact, it actually lifts the harness off the dog's back. Usually when dogs are doing counterbalance, it's kind of doing a lifting pressure. That means we're not putting pressure directly onto those joints. And that's good.
All right, so that's it for today. Thank you so much, Katrina, for telling us about mobility dog harnesses. And thank you, Dalton, for being a very, very cute model. Where can people find out more about the work that you do?
So if you really want to geek out on mobility dog stuff, check out mobilitydogresources.org. And that is where you will find a lot of information. The research is there, the studies are there, the explanations of the studies, which are easier to understand, are also there.
Okay.
And we've written, as that group, we've written what we would like to become standards because there's no standard in the industry. We want to take care of these dogs. So we're just trying to put forth information so we will make good choices. And my company is Boldly Designs.
I will put all of the links below as well so you can find them. Thank you.